Hello. So I'm super excited because Unreal just released the 5.3 preview um, version, and that means that it brings now a feature that I've always dreamed about since I started using Unreal, which is doing the skeleton and the skinning process all in Unreal. Which means that we can finally say goodbye to my Blender or any other tool and do the whole process in Unreal and rig, as we know now we can, and animate and render and everything. So this is super exciting. But it's still a very early stage of development, is a beta, so it will crash a lot, and hopefully things will just improve from here. In the video, I showed what I've learned from this past day of testing the tool, and hopefully is helpful and valuable for you. But if you know any other method, anything else from the skinning or creating skeletons that you've tested yourself, please let me know in the comments. I'll be really excited to learn from you guys as well. Uh, yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Okay, so we are in the 5.3 now. This is the third person template that I always use as a default. First thing is that we need to go in here and docking layout. I don't know why they don't make this as default, but anyway. So let's see how this works then. So for example, you could get any static mesh, and I'm selecting this one just because it was here, but I want to go to browse to assets, so I want to go where this mesh actually exists. So it's a static mesh, and then you right click and you will have, oh, it's not here, that's good though. You need to go in edit plugins and then skeletal. Yeah, this one is skeletal mesh editing tools, and you will ask to restart. Okay, so with that restarted, if you go now in the static mesh, then you have convert to skeletal mesh. Then you can select an existing skeleton or you can create new. In this case, let's just create new. So it gives you a skeleton and a skeletal mesh. Let's just save. So it's interesting because the options to edit the skeleton actually don't appear in the skeleton itself. You need to be in the skeletal mesh to be able to see these options here. So if we go here, edit bones, let's just show all hierarchy. So we have one root bone for now, and if you click edit the skeleton, you can do a couple of things. So you can, for example, place this somewhere else. So let's put this in here, and you can rename, and let's say we create a new joint, and I can just move it and place where I want. If you create another one, and you will notice that if I save like this, it will crash. Basically, as you know, Unreal only allows one root joint, so this one needs to be parented to the main hierarchy. So if you, let's say I'm happy with this hierarchy, I press accept, and now this is saved. So if I go back to my skeleton, I would see the skeleton like this, but it's currently not doing anything apart from well, the new joints are not doing anything. So if you go to skin, bind skin, you can select here to see as a preview of how the skin will be bind. Currently, I couldn't find an option to bind the skin just the skeletons you are selecting. That would be nice, but at the moment it's just bind skins the whole thing. There are two options here: direct distance, and this one, geodesic voxel, which I'll be honest, yeah, it seems like this one creates these stripes, and this one is a bit more of a rounded kind of shape, but I'm not really sure what's the difference between these two. Max influence, so let's say I just want 2 joints per vertex influencing, and then I apply accept. And now you will see if I go back to the skeleton, if I move this joint, then the deformation is happening on the new joints that I've created as well. Then you can edit the weights, which is basically painting the skin weights. So you have the option of brush. If you press B and hold, you can change the radius. You can have add, replace, multiply, relax, which is, yeah, it's the standard of what you would expect from this tool. I tested these two as well, as I noticed that the surface, I will show an example later, but when there are other geometries, the surface tends to keep the influence in the object you are actually selecting. But I will show this later. You can change the strength, the fall off, and then you can also select vertices. So this is cool. So you can come here, for example, just select this vertex and say, for this joint, I want 100% on these joints. And let's say that for this one, I want 0. Yeah, there are other things here which I haven't explored yet, edit attributes and paint maps as well. So I just focus on these two, which are the ones I imagine we will be using the most. So it would be nice to have a mirror option here. The brush function doesn't have it. The vertex function has it, but if I select here and I press mirror, I would expect that the other vertices would be selected, and I can't see that happening. So yeah, I think this is still needs a little bit more work. Another thing that would be really nice to have is that if you double click, you select the whole mesh, because in case of characters that we have different meshes for the same character, that would be really helpful. Then you have these other options, which are, let's just accept the paint weights. These are the deformers that would deform the actual mesh. So for example, the lattice here, you are changing the original mesh. You're not skinning or anything. Now this mesh looks like this. Sorry, let's just open again the skeleton so we can see. Skeleton. Yeah, this is how the original mesh now looks like. And then if you play with the joints, then it would move according to the skinning. There's a lot of things that we can be explored in here, and other also more kind of modeling tools. So for example, remesh will give more polygons to play, and etc. That's just the first example. Of course, we are not going to be rigging a cube, I imagine. We're mainly going to be rigging a character. So what I've done is that I went to Mixamo. So I'm on Mixamo. I'm not just going to download this character with skin, because I want the mesh as well. So if I just bring that to here, let's import and download Talking on phone. I'll import the whole thing, including the animations. So here I have my physics assets, my skeleton, my animation. For some reason it saves the T-pose as well, so the animation, the skeleton mesh. If I save all. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to skeleton mesh and I'm going to edit this existent skeleton. That's because Mixamo characters don't have a root joint, and that is really helpful when you are animating in Unreal. So let's say I want to create a new root joint here. If I go to edit skeleton, you will realize that if I create a new joint, Let's rename as root. I can't just parent the whole group under it. It just doesn't allow me. So the workaround I found for it is that if I create, let's say I create a new bone called hips, hips 2, and I copy the transform from this, copy all properties, and I paste in here, here, right click, paste. Then I have the location of the hips, right? So what I want to do is I want to copy the location of the root, and I want this joint now to be my roots joint. So if I go here, well, it's basically just 0, 0, 0. So if I go on this one and I do 0, 0, 0, now I have in the right location for a root joint. So if I call this root 2, we'll clean up this later. So now I can have my hips joint parented to the root 2, and then I can parent the spine, the leg, the right and the left leg. So now I have a root joint, hips, and then everything under it. I can delete this one for now because I won't use it, and I can just rename this as hips and renames this as root. There is a problem here. The problem is that the hips doesn't have the skinning of the actual mesh. It's the roots that have the skinning. So if I accept the edit skeleton here, and I go to skin weights, I can go to edit weights. So I'm not binding because it's bind already. So I can see that the roots have all the influence in this area, and the hips have none. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select this one and I'll manually paint it. As I said, it's not easy because you could just select the whole vertices of this geometry and hope that that would cover it. But yeah, you need to be very careful to not just, let me just to kind of leak to another part of geometry. So hopefully that's it. I can still see that is not 100% white for some reason. So if I reduce the fall off, so I can try to keep, I'm just clicking and dragging here basically to try to get as much as possible. So if we go back to roots, yeah, I can't see any vertex painted here. If I go accept, then if we go back to the skeleton and if I move the hips joint, is there anything left behind? I think we're fine. And if I move the whole root, of course, everything will move together. So let's just save this, save the skeleton. Let's see if our animation is actually playing correctly. So this is what happens with the original animation. So for some reason, if you close your project and open it again, I literally haven't touched anything on it. The animation just works. And you can see here, skeleton tree, that we do have a root joint that I can just move the character around and the animation is playing nicely. So that's one way of doing things. The other way I wanted to show is reusing another skeleton, or an existing skeleton, sorry. So if we select the skeletal mesh, I just want to create a static mesh from this. Characters, not sure where I'm saving this. yeah, characters. So this is a static mesh. Okay. So if I go right click, convert to skeletal mesh, I can use existing skeleton. And I can choose, for example, the mannequin. So let's see if that works. Skeletal mesh, static mesh, yes. So here's the mannequin skeleton, but then now in the using the Mixamo character. What would you do in this case is that you would go to edit skeleton and you start moving around and placing oops. Why is no? Okay. You need to come here and then you need to select update children. I think that's it. Yeah. So then you move everything together. If you feel like your rotations, your translations are not as precise as you would want, make sure that these are not activated because these will snap in certain degrees of range. So now I can move freely without snapping. And also another thing that you can change is the field of view. So if you make these lower, you can get the camera much closer and that might give you a better precision on how to place the joints. Let's say I'm happy with this. If I click in here and I go mirror, it does the other side as well. You see that the orientation is not really correct. I tried using this orient button, but I don't think it's really doing anything. Yeah, I don't think it's really changing anything because I would expect that one of these axes, in this case the x-axis, would then aim towards this direction. This would probably cause issues in the future if you have animations running on this skeleton, so the orientation is very important. So I'm not sure why this is not being oh, probably it was better keeping orange children off. I'm really not sure how to use this. Anyway, let's go back to the mirror. So then you have your skeleton placed correctly. Let's say if you save the skeleton, then you would have to do the bind skinning because this character is not bind. And then you will see that the automatic bind skinning is not really the best. As you can see, the root will be skinning this part. The pelvis doesn't have any influence. Yeah, it's all a bit strange. Let's press anyway, because that would allow us to start doing the skinning. So if we go to edit weights, and then that's when you would start. This is the legs, because I haven't done that yet. So you can see that there is some parts in here that should be removed. If you press Ctrl, it does remove those ones. But yeah, it would be so much easier if you could just select all the vertex and that's it. Just, paint the whole influence as one. Even here, as I'm doing it, I can see I am going through some parts in here where it's just leaking to the other part of the body that I don't want to skin. It is not as intuitive. It's hard to you cannot like pose the character as well. So in this part here, normally if you are in Maya, you would just rotate this skeleton here just to get access to the other parts that are not hard, that are a bit harder, or even just translate this whole leg out and just make it easy to paint and then just kind of place it back in the correct place. You don't have those abilities in here unless I'm missing anything, which is very possible. um, I'm not going to go through this whole process, but let's say that we have something we are happy with, and then we can then reuse any of the mannequin's animations. Let's say this one. We could then now replace to the static mesh that we just created. It's not as bad as I would expect actually. But yeah, that's the cool thing about it. That if you reuse a skeleton that exists, that means the whole package of animations will be able to be used as well.